The early morning was quiet, with tides lapping at the shore. Years of wandering had brought me to this place, where I started each day with a run along the coast, letting go of the past. Life hadn't always been solitary. My family had been my anchor, but cracks forced me to rebuild alone. Now, I lived in sync with the waves. The day's plan was simple: a run, a shower, and college football. San Diego State played in the morning, USC in the afternoon. After an 8-mile run, I cleared my head and enjoyed La Jolla's warmth while much of the country faced snow. After a shower, I headed to Tequila Joe's, where San Diego State had already scored. The bar's big screens and good food made it my favorite spot. Vivian, the friendly waitress, greeted me with her usual warmth. San Diego State played well with smooth plays and strong defense. I finished my chicken salad and ordered another beer. As the team neared another touchdown, a man walked in, heading straight for me. I didn't notice him until he stood in front of me, and I looked up, startled to see him. "Hi, Dad," he said. The words hit me like a blow. There was a time when hearing them filled me with indescribable joy, but those days were far behind me. Now they stung. I studied him briefly, trying to connect the grown man before me with the boy I once knew. He wasn't a child anymore. Not by a long shot. James was over 21 now. It had been 5 years since I'd last seen him. Back then, he was an awkward, lanky 16-year-old just beginning to shave. Now he stood taller, broader, and with a muscular frame. He had grown into a man during my absence. "Hello, James," I replied, keeping my tone composed. "Why?" he demanded, his voice trembling with anger. I had played out this moment in my mind countless times, rehearsing what to say if we ever met again. But now, faced with James, I was blank. His anger was unmistakable. Clenched fists, white-knuckled fury in his eyes. I stayed seated knowing standing might provoke him. I felt a deep, bitter regret for the pain I'd caused him and his brothers over the past 5 years. The only words I could muster were the truth. "I'm not your dad." His voice rose, bewildered. "What?" "I assume you're asking why I left you, your brothers, and your mom. The reason is simple. I'm not your father." The tension in his fists eased, but his face showed shock and confusion. The revelation was shattering his understanding of the past, much like it had destroyed mine years ago. I guided him into a chair, and as his world began to unravel, I called for 2 beers. This wasn't how I had imagined sharing a drink with the boy I once thought was my son. "How?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. I looked him in the eye. "It started in high school. Your mother, Sandy, and I met in science class. She was the new girl, and we quickly became inseparable. She was beautiful, smart, and kind. Over the years, we fell deeply in love. By the time we graduated, I was heading to MIT, and she enrolled at Boston College so we could stay together. We moved to Boston, struggled through school, and built a life. We were young and wildly in love." I paused to let him absorb the history before continuing. "After graduation, we moved back to Denver, got married, and started our life together. I landed a job in aeronautical engineering, and she worked in medical billing. Our first years were busy but happy. Then Sandy got pregnant. When you were born, I was overjoyed. You were perfect, and I poured myself into providing for our family." James was silent, absorbing every word. "With a new baby, things were hectic, but we managed. Sandy got pregnant again, and we moved to a larger house in the suburbs before your brother Caleb arrived. Life was chaotic with 2 young kids, but I thought we were happy. I had no idea something was wrong until 5 years ago." I stopped, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. That's when I learned the truth. Sandy had been unfaithful more than once. A paternity test confirmed what I didn't want to believe. Neither you nor your brother was mine. James stared at me, his world crumbling further. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't know how," I admitted. "You were kids, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy the only sense of family you knew. So I left, thinking it was better for all of us. But I see now that leaving caused even more pain." Vivian brought the beers, and we sat in heavy silence. The truth was out, but it felt like cold comfort. After Caleb was born, Sandy and I decided she wouldn't return to work. She kept in touch with her friends and occasionally went out, but within a year she was pregnant again. Eric arrived, and a year later, Daniel followed. By the time Daniel was born, you were 4. 4 boys felt like enough, and Sandy had her tubes tied. With 4 kids, intimacy between us became strained, but I didn't mind. I thought we were happy. Our small home quickly became cramped, so we moved to a house in Aurora with a spacious yard for you boys to play in. As time went on, I noticed subtle things about Sandy. She always referred to you as her boys, never ours, which stung more than I cared to admit. At social events, she'd dismiss my work, telling people I drew planes for a living. I didn't correct her, partly to avoid embarrassing her, but also because my work was classified. Still, it hurt. My career was demanding. I led a design team developing a stealth fighter, and with tensions brewing in the Middle East, the Air Force pressed hard for results. Despite my workload, I prioritized family. I never missed a Little League game, even coaching some of your teams. Balancing work and fatherhood with 4 kids wasn't easy, but I made it work. When Daniel started school, Sandy had more free time and threw herself into volunteering. She worked with organizations like the Breast Cancer Society and the Library Foundation, creating a new social circle and filling her days. Life seemed good. My stealth fighter debuted during the Gulf War, earning global acclaim. You boys were thriving in sports and activities, and Sandy appeared fulfilled. But under the surface, cracks were forming. Looking back, I see how Sandy occasionally tried to create distance between me and you boys. She signed you all up for different activities, baseball, football, volleyball, and music, ensuring I was spread thin. Daniel's musical talent stood out, though. It amazed me, as neither Sandy nor I were musical. I joked once that maybe the postman was a musician, and Sandy just smiled. Then everything unraveled. I turned 40 and the Air Force required a physical. The tests were routine until the doctor discovered something unusual during an exam. Concerned, he referred me to a specialist. When the medical community moves fast, you know it's serious. I endured more tests, and while relieved it wasn't cancer, the specialist blindsided me with an unexpected question. When did you become sterile? Confused, I insisted I wasn't sterile. I had 4 sons. The doctor politely disagreed. Shocked and disbelieving, I sought second, third, and fourth opinions. They all confirmed the same thing. I was sterile, likely due to a motorcycle accident at 14. Devastation doesn't begin to describe how I felt. I needed answers, so I took all 4 of you to the doctor under the guise of flu shots. Instead, I ordered DNA tests. 2 weeks later, the results confirmed my worst fears. Not only were none of you biologically mine, but each of you had a different father. My world shattered. I spent that night drowning in scotch at a bar, trying to process the betrayal and lies. The next morning, I tried to function but couldn't. My team at work noticed and sent me home. That evening, Sandy prepared dinner, completely unaware of what I'd learned. I sat across from her, replaying every moment of our life together through a new lens. The woman I loved now seemed like a stranger. Overwhelmed, I excused myself and vomited. I purged not just the meal, but the life I thought I had. Sandy tried to comfort me, but I pushed her away, retreating to the spare bedroom to cry through the night. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay. I quit my job, emptied half of our savings, and left a simple note on the table. I know. Then I got in my truck and drove east, aimlessly chasing escape. I reached the Atlantic Ocean in Maine, where I contemplated ending it all, staring at the waves and imagining how far I could swim before giving up. But even at my lowest, I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave you boys without answers as much as I hated Sandy. For months, I drifted down the East Coast, taking odd jobs to survive. I worked as a dishwasher, a fry cook, and even a tram driver at Disney World. In Atlanta, while working at an auto shop, the FBI found me. Apparently, the government doesn't appreciate it when someone with top-secret clearance vanishes. The agents weren't hostile, just concerned. They questioned why I left, but I gave them a vague answer about marital issues. They didn't press further, only reminding me of my confidentiality agreements. One agent offered a quiet apology before they left, acknowledging my pain without saying the words. And then they were gone, leaving me to piece together what was left of my life. Work had become my refuge after my life unraveled. Back at the shop, Al handed me a brake job, but I could tell he didn't trust me anymore. A week later, I left. From then on, I suspected the feds were keeping tabs on me, occasionally sending someone to check in. They likely wanted reassurance that I wasn't revealing classified information, but sharing secrets, or even speaking to anyone, was far from my mind. I was broken, and people seemed to sense it, giving me space. I wandered the East Coast for a year before heading west. New Orleans, Houston, Kansas City, Phoenix, and finally, the Pacific. My days were filled with fleeting jobs, endless thinking, and too many tears. I replayed every moment of my past with Sandy, looking for signs I had missed, clues hidden in plain sight. I remembered coworkers, James, Caleb, Susan's boyfriend Daniel, and felt the crushing weight of their names. Each memory deepened the betrayal. On the West Coast, amidst the chaos in my mind, I found solace in the sunsets. Every evening, I watched the sun dip into the ocean. each one unique and strangely healing. Slowly, I began piecing myself back together. Answers never came, but I started to accept that they might not. In Seattle, while working as a waiter in a family restaurant, life took an unexpected turn. One afternoon, two men came in, looking every bit the engineers with their pocket protectors and blueprints. I noticed their jet design, a small executive aircraft, and casually pointed out a flaw in the air intake. They were startled by my observation, and I sketched a quick adjustment on a napkin, calculating how it could improve performance. Speechless, they left with my unsolicited advice but returned the next day with a man named Brad Linsky. He confirmed my suggestions were accurate and asked to talk. Reluctantly, I agreed. Brad and his partners were developing a new jet, and my insights had impressed them. After days of hesitation, I decided to hear them out. Soon I found myself flying to San Diego in their jet, reviewing designs and offering more improvements. Brad was persistent, and before I knew it, I was signing on as a partner in their project. For the first time in years, I felt purpose return. My ideas shaped the aircraft, some even earning patents, and our work gained attention from major players like Airbus and Boeing. Licensing deals brought in royalties, and my life, once shattered, began to rebuild. I bought a house on the beach where I could watch the sunsets that had become my therapy. Work consumed me, helping me escape the loneliness that lingered. For 5 years, I kept everyone at arm's length. Then James walked into my life, bringing the past I had buried crashing back. He sat across from me in a dimly lit sports bar, his face etched with pain. As I recounted everything, my discoveries, the betrayal, and my failures, he listened in stunned silence. When I finished, he looked older, burdened by truths he hadn't expected to hear. His tears mirrored my own as he stood to leave. Before walking out, he hugged me, an embrace filled with raw emotion. That night, I sat in a daze, unsure of what to do next. The memories of Sandy remained a blurry, painful history I tried to suppress. But the boys? They were different. I'd failed them. They weren't my biological sons, but I had been their father, and I abandoned them when they needed me most. Forgiving myself felt impossible. James asked if we could talk again tomorrow. I said yes. As he left, I felt a glimmer of hope, though uncertainty loomed. After he was gone, Vivian, the bartender, approached with 2 beers. She admitted she'd overheard everything and hugged me tightly, her tears joining mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And for a moment, I didn't feel entirely alone. My entire world fractured in an instant. "You're not my son," reverberated endlessly in my head, overshadowing every word that followed. I heard the rest of his story, but those 4 words defined everything. My identity, my origins, everything I believed about my life was obliterated. Tears burned my face as I stumbled out of the restaurant, numb and desperate for the solitude of my hotel room. At a small hotel in Pacific Beach, I tried to piece together the day's events. It was impossible. I wanted the life I'd known, but I understood it was gone. For 5 years, I had been the de facto father figure for my brothers, a role I couldn't abandon. Yet as I lay there, memories attacked me. Every Little League game, every family dinner. Every night he held my head when I was sick. This man, whose blood I didn't share, had been my father in every way that mattered. Sorrow consumed me until sleep mercifully overtook the pain. Morning came cold and unforgiving. The brisk Pacific air offered no clarity. I dressed quickly and headed to his house, walking the few miles that felt endless. When I arrived, he opened the door before the bell finished ringing. He invited me in, but I declined. "I heard everything you said," I began, "but I have questions, and I need answers. I'm heading home today, and I have to figure out what to do next." His eyes held the weight of regret. "What will you tell your brothers? Your mother?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted truthfully. I wasn't ready to face those conversations. There was a heavy silence between us. I broke it. "Whoever my biological father is, he's irrelevant. You raised me. You're my dad. You always have been." My voice cracked and tears followed. He pulled me into an embrace, his strength anchoring me as we both wept. "I want to be back in your lives," he said softly. "But I can't face your mother. That pain is too deep. Every memory feels tainted. I don't know how to start." We moved to the kitchen, where he poured 2 cups of coffee. We sat in silence, staring at the waves beyond the patio. "You're right," I said finally. "Mom hurt you. She hurt all of us. But she's still my mom, and you're still my dad. My brothers and I need you in our lives, no matter how complicated this is. We'll figure it out." I saw something shift in him then. The burden he'd carried visibly lifted, and he seemed to stand taller. His hug was crushing, his emotions raw. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I left with hope, but also uncertainty. The road ahead would be anything but simple. The drive west had been long and full of reflection, but heading home was different. Memories flooded back, especially the day everything changed. I was 16, arriving home early from school. My routine was simple: drop my bag by the stairs, raid the fridge, and drink milk straight from the carton when no one was watching. That day, though, I saw a note on the kitchen table. In Dad's handwriting, it read, "I know." I didn't understand what it meant, so I left it there. Figuring I'd find out when Mom and Dad got home, I went to watch a rerun of The Simpsons before starting homework. But the peace didn't last. A piercing cry echoed through the house. I rushed downstairs to find Mom crumpled on the floor, clutching the note to her chest. Her sobs were primal, guttural. I tried to help her, but she was inconsolable. I managed to guide her to the bedroom where she curled around Dad's pillow, trembling. "Where's Dad?" I asked, desperate for answers. "He had to leave," she whispered through tears. "He had to go." I didn't know what to do. Caleb and Daniel were playing in the yard, oblivious to the chaos. Eric wouldn't be home until dinner. Mom asked me to make mac and cheese for my brothers, so I did. Around the table, the conversation was light. Video games, school fights, basketball schedules. No one mentioned Mom's absence or Dad's sudden departure. Later that evening, I tried calling Dad. He didn't answer. My heart sank as I left a voicemail, begging him to call back. He never did. The next morning, Mom looked hollow. She told me to get ready for school and promised we'd talk that evening. I didn't press her, but unease settled deep in my chest. That night, when she finally explained that Dad had left and wasn't coming back, our lives shifted forever. Now, driving home from San Diego, I couldn't shake the weight of those memories. Dad had been everything to us, even when he left. Now I had to figure out how to rebuild the bridge between him and my brothers. The road ahead seemed endless, but for the first time, I felt like there was a chance to mend what had been broken. All day, I dreaded the inevitable conversation waiting at home. I couldn't focus in class or recall a single thing any teacher said. By the time the final bell rang, I bolted straight home, hoping to find answers, but fearing the worst. When I arrived, Aunt Lauren was there. Though not a blood relative, she was a close friend of Mom's, and her presence was a bad sign. She was tidying up, washing dishes, and moving through the house as if she belonged there. Without a word, I headed upstairs, passing Mom's closed bedroom door, and collapsed on my bed. Tears came unbidden, a slow trickle down my cheeks. I could hear my brothers arrive, their laughter mingling with the familiar hum of the Xbox. How could they not sense the dread hanging over us? Dinner came too soon. Aunt Lauren called us to the table, where she had set out a meal. Mom appeared moments later. She looked fragile, as if she had barely held herself together long enough to make it downstairs. Her silence was deafening. She sat in her usual seat, but there was no plate set for Dad. As we ate, the usual sibling banter, teasing, joking, and petty arguments was absent. An unspoken understanding settled over us. Nothing would ever be the same. I kept glancing at Mom, who barely touched her food, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Halfway through the meal, she spoke. She began with a strained confession. She admitted to a mistake so painful that Dad had left, his anger too great for reconciliation. Her words were heavy with guilt, and her message was clear. We were not to blame, nor was Dad. The fault, she insisted, was hers alone. As her words sank in, the table fell silent. I heard quiet sobs from my brothers, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Mom abruptly excused herself, retreating upstairs, and the rest of us sat in stunned silence. Plates remained half full as my brothers scattered to grieve in their own ways. Aunt Lauren stayed behind, clearing the table and washing dishes. Out of habit, I joined her, drying plates as she washed. In a quiet, steady voice, she turned to me and said I would have to take on more responsibility as the eldest. She emphasized how much my brothers and Mom would need me. Nodding silently, I agreed, though I couldn't help but wonder who would be there for me. That dinner marked the beginning of our family's slow unraveling. Mom, who once volunteered at the Cancer Society, announced the following week that she had taken a paying job. It wasn't much, she said, and we'd have to tighten our belts. Money became an ongoing concern. In less than 6 months, our lives changed drastically. There were no more video games, no more dinners at restaurants, no more small indulgences like chips or soda. I quit after-school sports and got a part-time job at Denny's, bussing tables and refilling drinks. The modest paycheck I earned was split among my brothers, softening the blow for them but stretching me thin. Each of us dealt with Dad's absence in our own way. Caleb poured himself into academics, determined to make Dad proud if he ever came back. Eric channeled his energy into sports, becoming an all-star athlete but sacrificing any semblance of a social life. Daniel, however, drifted. At first, he found solace in his guitar, but by 13, he began falling in with the wrong crowd. By 14, I was certain he was smoking pot, coming home with bloodshot eyes and a defiant attitude. I tried to intervene, but he met me with anger, yelling that I wasn't his father. It stung, but I didn't have the tools to help him. My own guilt weighed heavily, consuming my thoughts. I worked long hours, but it was never enough. Mom continued to withdraw, working exhausting hours and retreating to her room each night. The vibrant woman she once was faded, replaced by someone pale, tired, and burdened by regret. Aunt Lauren visited occasionally, but the warmth and laughter of our home were gone. Blame crept into our family dynamic. Caleb and Eric eventually turned their anger toward Dad, resenting his inability to forgive Mom. Daniel, on the other hand, directed his anger at her, their relationship deteriorating into constant conflict. I found myself stuck in the middle, trying to keep the peace while struggling with my own resentment toward both of them. By the time I turned 19, I decided to search for Dad. Mom claimed she hadn't found him, but I suspected she had tried. My efforts were sporadic, combing through online records and articles that mentioned his name. Then, one day, I found a clue. A race listing for the San Diego Half Marathon matched his name and age, with La Jolla listed as his residence. A background photo of the race crowd revealed someone who looked like him. With that lead, I decided to track him down. My family was at a crossroads, and I held the key to unraveling or healing the wounds that had defined us for years. As I made my way back from San Diego, the weight of what I'd discovered pressed heavily on me. The truth could shift my brother's resentment toward Mom, who was barely holding on. I didn't know how to move forward, but I knew it was my burden to carry. Stopping for the night at a small motel, I tried to sleep, but the questions and doubts kept me awake. By morning, I was back on the road, each mile bringing me closer to home and the reckoning that awaited. The restaurant where I worked was a revolving door of young staff, but somehow I managed to stick around the longest. 8 months earlier, a new waitress named Vanessa Brown was hired. She was stunning with an infectious energy that drew everyone in. Despite her popularity, she gravitated toward me, and we quickly struck up a friendship. Balancing school, work, and family left me little time for anything else. But one night after a shift, I impulsively asked her to grab coffee. To my surprise, she agreed. That night at Starbucks turned into hours of conversation, the first of many coffee dates. Within weeks, we were spending most of our free time together. Eventually, I asked her on a proper date, and from there, our relationship blossomed. Months later, Vanessa invited me to her place while her roommate was out. That night, I lost my pureness to her and assumed she'd done the same. Our connection deepened, or so I thought. By the time we hit our 5-month anniversary, I gave her a promise ring, which she accepted with enthusiasm, declaring her love for me. For a while, I believed I was truly happy. But happiness is fragile. 8 months into our relationship, I picked up an extra shift at the restaurant, only for it to end early when the original waitress returned. Excited to surprise Vanessa, I headed to her apartment. Passing her window, I froze at the sight of her kissing Simon Joyner, our morning manager. My heart sank. When Vanessa opened the door, her shock was evident. She stammered, trying to explain, but I didn't want to hear it. Calmly, I asked for my ring back, removing it from her hand myself. I told her to forget I ever existed and walked away, shattered. That night, I packed a bag and left for San Diego, chasing the leads I had on my father, hoping the distance would help me process the betrayal. Returning home from San Diego days later, I kept my trip vague during dinner with my family, casually mentioning visits to tourist attractions and potential schools for my younger brothers. When Mom asked about Vanessa, I told her the truth. Her reaction was immediate. She fled the table in tears. My brothers teased me, but I was lost in thought, unable to shake the parallels between Vanessa's betrayal and Mom's infidelity. Both had destroyed the trust they were given, though Mom's actions had torn apart an entire family. Determined to help my brothers escape the weight of our home life, I suggested Caleb and Eric consider San Diego State University. Caleb could transfer as a junior, and Eric could start as a freshman. Initially, they resisted, hesitant to leave Mom and Daniel behind. Eric warmed up to the idea quickly, but Caleb was reluctant, questioning my insistence on San Diego. Frustrated, I finally revealed the truth. Dad was there. The news stunned them. A flurry of questions followed: where he was, why he left, and whether they could see him. I explained how I had found him after Vanessa and I broke up and that I'd been in contact with him ever since. Dad was supportive of their move to San Diego, but didn't want Mom to know. The plan gained momentum, and we framed it as a school visit during winter break. Mom was supportive, but clearly uneasy about the idea. On the day they left, she hugged them tightly, unaware they were staying at Dad's house. Daniel and I watched them drive off, unsure what the trip would bring. Over the next few days, Caleb and Eric called regularly, sounding happier than I'd heard them in years. They raved about San Diego's beauty, the university, and the person helping them with their applications: Dad. When they returned home, their excitement was palpable. Both had applied to SDSU, confident scholarships and financial aid would make it possible. That night, as we gathered for pizza, they shared stories from their trip. While Mom smiled and listened, I could see the tension behind her eyes. She knew something had shifted but didn't ask. As my brothers talked about their plans, I couldn't help but wonder how this new chapter would affect our family, and whether it might finally bring some healing. Life seemed to unravel in slow motion after Mom left the table that evening, retreating to her room as she often did. Daniel disappeared as well, leaving Caleb, Eric, and me alone. That privacy allowed Caleb and Eric to open up about their time with Dad. They described how emotional their reunion had been, their decision to stay in San Diego after school ended, and their choice to let Dad's version of events lie, sparing Mom further pain. The months leading up to their departure were bittersweet. Caleb excelled academically, and Eric shone in sports, earning recognition for his achievements. Amid their preparations, no one seemed to notice Daniel's increasing withdrawal or Mom's worsening state. I knew Daniel had moved on to harder pills, and my attempts at intervention were met with anger and defiance. Mom, though aware, seemed powerless to help. Her health visibly declined. She was thinner, her energy waning, and her once lustrous hair now dull. Just after Christmas, Daniel disappeared for 3 days. Police found him in a pills house, dazed and strung out. We placed him in a rehab center, but he fought the process every step of the way. During a family session, Daniel unleashed his fury at Mom, blaming her for Dad's absence and the family's disintegration. Her tears didn't stop him. If anything, they fueled his anger. In a trembling voice, she took responsibility, asking him to channel his pain into healing rather than self-destruction. By the time Caleb and Eric left for San Diego in June, the house felt emptier than ever. They settled quickly, excited for a fresh start and the chance to reconnect with Dad. I planned to visit them in August, but the trip was cut short when I received a devastating call from Mom. Daniel had overdosed and was in the ICU. Rushing back, I found Mom at Daniel's bedside, broken and exhausted. She blamed herself for not being able to save him. That night, Dad arrived unannounced, guilt heavy in his voice as he took responsibility for his absence. We discussed a plan to move Daniel to a rehab facility in San Diego, where being near his brothers and away from Mom might aid his recovery. Dad arranged everything, including the private jet to transport Daniel. The following day, as Mom and I prepared for Daniel's transfer, she insisted I go with him. She argued that as the family's anchor, Daniel needed me to guide him through recovery. Despite my protests, I was on the plane the next morning. Daniel's transition to the San Diego facility was smoother than expected, and over the next few weeks, progress was slow but steady. Family therapy sessions became pivotal. Daniel began to open up, admitting how much he missed Dad and wished for reconciliation. When the therapist asked what he'd say to his father if he could, Daniel tearfully expressed forgiveness and a longing to reunite. At that moment, Dad walked into the room. Daniel's initial shock gave way to overwhelming emotion as he fell to his knees, sobbing. Dad embraced him, and soon, Caleb, Eric, and I joined in. It felt like a long-lost piece of our family had returned. Therapy continued to address Daniel's obsession and our fractured family dynamics, but one glaring issue remained unspoken: Mom. Dad couldn't bring himself to confront her, and I had no idea how to bridge the gap. I kept Mom updated on Daniel's progress, but withheld any mention of Dad's involvement. 2 months into Daniel's recovery, I decided it was time to visit Mom. She dismissed the idea, insisting Daniel needed me more. Though reluctant, I respected her wishes, but began quietly planning a trip home. Before I could finalize anything, Aunt Lauren called with news that shattered me. Mom was gone. Her death brought an abrupt, devastating end to the fragile threads holding us together, leaving me grappling with the weight of unfinished conversations, unresolved pain, and a family forever altered. The cold mountain air pierced through me as we stood at the graveside. A small group gathered for Mom's final farewell. Her resting place was nestled among the trees, with a view of the distant peaks. She would have loved the peacefulness of it. My brothers, Eric, Caleb, Daniel, and I stood side by side, each of us engulfed in our grief. Mom's only brother had managed to attend, offering quiet support as we endured the ceremony in the bitter Colorado winter. Dad attended too, but he remained at a distance, standing silently in the background. After the service, we received condolences from Mom's coworkers and a few remaining friends. Her circle had grown small in the years since Dad left. As the eldest, I had handled most of the arrangements, but Mom had planned much of it in advance, leaving detailed instructions. Aunt Lauren was the last to leave the cemetery. She hugged each of us tightly, her tears flowing freely. When she reached me, she pulled me aside and handed me 2 envelopes. "Your mother wanted you to have these after she passed," she said. "She wouldn't let me tell anyone she was sick. Please call me after you read them." I tucked the letters into my pocket without looking and thanked her. Mom's death had blindsided us. None of us knew she had cancer. Reflecting on the past few months, I realized she had seemed unwell, tired, thinner, but I had attributed it to the stress of Daniel's struggles. Guilt gnawed at me. I should have seen the signs. The call from Aunt Lauren that night had turned my world upside down. When I told Dad and my brothers the news, the room fell silent, then erupted with tears and denial. Daniel broke down first, saying it couldn't be true. Dad pulled him into a hug, and soon we were all clinging to one another, grieving the loss of the woman who had held our family together through so much. Dad immediately arranged for us to fly back to Colorado. By the early hours of the morning, we arrived at the house. Aunt Lauren greeted us, offering her condolences and helping us settle in. Dad opted to stay at a hotel, saying he couldn't face staying in the house. The days that followed were a whirlwind of phone calls, funeral preparations, and quiet moments of reflection. The service was small, just family and a few friends. Afterward, we returned to the house for a quiet meal prepared by Lauren. That evening, we sat in the living room, wrapped in our thoughts. Lauren gently guided the conversation, asking questions that encouraged us to share memories of Mom. Her skillful approach helped break the silence and began to ease some of our pain. Dad remained mostly silent, though I caught Lauren's pleading glances toward him. He stayed distant, his emotions carefully guarded. After everyone retired for the night, I went to my room. As I removed my coat, I found the 2 envelopes Lauren had given me. Both were addressed to me in Mom's handwriting, with one marked, "Open me first." I sat on my bed, hesitated, then unfolded the first letter. Mom's words hit me like a tidal wave. She admitted to hiding her illness and confessed to carrying secrets that had shaped and shattered our family. Her letter detailed her gratitude for the life we shared, but also her profound regret for the lies that had tainted it. She wrote about her childhood in Oklahoma, her close-knit family, and the moment everything changed, a traumatic event that cast a shadow over her life. She revealed that when she was 14, she fell while climbing a tree and was injured. Her Uncle Jack, who was responsible for watching the children that day, attacked her under the pretense of caring for her injuries. She described the fear, confusion, and helplessness she felt, and how that experience shaped her choices and relationships, including those with Dad and us. As I read, waves of anger, sorrow, and understanding washed over me. Mom's pain had been hidden behind her strength, her secrets woven into the fabric of our family's story. This letter was her final attempt to unburden herself and pass that truth to me, trusting me to carry it forward. I folded the letter and set it aside, unable to open the second one yet. Exhaustion and emotion overwhelmed me. I knew this was just the beginning of uncovering a story I hadn't been prepared to face, but I also realized it might be the key to understanding her, our family, and how to move forward in the aftermath of her loss. Afterward, Uncle Jack told me never to tell anyone, insisting it was my fault for climbing the tree and getting hurt. He said people would blame me. I cried myself to sleep every night for a week, my parents none the wiser. They assumed my tears were from the injuries, and the bruises from his hands blended in with the ones from the fall. They never suspected anything. For the next year, Uncle Jack continued to offense me. I avoided playing with my cousins, but my brothers often forced me to join them. My parents thought I was being difficult and left me under his care. The offense happened nearly every month, with the family remaining close to Uncle Jack and his children. It wasn't until a year later that my father caught him. Dad came home early from work and found Uncle Jack attacking me in my bedroom. The rage in my father's eyes was something I'd never seen before. He pulled Uncle Jack off me and unleashed a flurry of punches, leaving Jack bloodied and unconscious. I sat frozen, shocked and exposed. An ambulance took Jack to the hospital, and the police came to investigate. The incident tore our family apart. Despite the evidence, many relatives sided with Jack, urging my father to forgive him and drop the charges. My dad refused. He gave the family an ultimatum: either support us and ensure Jack went to jail, or never speak to him again. When they tried to negotiate, Dad stood firm. Jack went to jail, and we moved to Colorado, severing all ties with Dad's family. Although my father's actions protected me, they didn't erase the damage. I carried the weight of guilt, not only for what Jack had done, but for tearing apart Dad's family. I felt broken, unworthy, and convinced no boy could ever truly want me. When I met your father in school, I was terrified of boys. Therapy helped me manage the trauma, but the fear lingered. He was different, patient, kind, and never pushed me into anything I wasn't ready for. We became close, supporting each other through our weaknesses. Over time, I fell in love with him. He asked me to homecoming, and I decided to give myself to him that night. The week leading up to it was a battle with doubt. I hadn't been touched by anyone since Uncle Jack, and the thought terrified me. But I wanted to move forward, to be loved. That night, he was gentle and didn't do anything I didn't want. I felt safe, and for the first time, I believed I could have a future with him. From then on, I knew he was the man I would marry. When he was accepted to MIT, I was devastated. The thought of him leaving paralyzed me with fear. Both families worked to get me into Boston College so we could stay together. But in Boston, my insecurities began to resurface. He spent long hours studying, leaving me alone. I dreaded being by myself and surrounded myself with friends who helped me escape the loneliness. The group liked to party and drink, and I joined in, desperate to feel connected. Sometimes, when the night ended and everyone started to leave, I flirted with some of the guys to keep them around. It never went further than that, but I kept it from your father. Looking back, those moments planted the seeds of the mistakes that would later haunt me. After we graduated and moved back to Colorado, life felt stable again. Our wedding was a dream, and I was deeply in love. Your father got his dream job, and I worked in insurance. My job was simple and didn't require a degree, but I didn't care. We were happy, or so I thought. But the demons I had buried began to resurface, and within a few months, they broke free. As your father's work hours increased, the loneliness crept back in. I turned to my coworkers for company, spending evenings at bars to avoid being alone. One coworker, James, caught my attention. He reminded me of your father in some ways, but he also had traits that brought back memories of Uncle Jack, something I tried to ignore. One night, after too many drinks, I followed James to his house instead of going home. We ended up sleeping together on his couch. Overwhelmed with guilt, I left immediately, showered, and cried myself to sleep before your father came home. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, but James had other ideas. The next day, he cornered me at work, pulling me into a supply closet under the pretense of privacy. He dismissed my protests, asserting control in a way that mirrored Uncle Jack's actions years ago. I was paralyzed, transported back to the terrified 14-year-old girl who couldn't escape. James made it clear I belonged to him now, using my fear and shame to ensure my compliance. From that moment, my life spiraled further. The ghosts of my past and the choices I made in my desperation consumed me, creating the cracks that would eventually break apart everything we had built. When I got pregnant, I was overjoyed, believing it was your father's child. I hoped this would keep James away, and for a while, it worked. But shortly before your birth, he summoned me again, angry that I was carrying my husband's child. He demanded I name you James. Desperate, I agreed. I had no reason to suspect at first that James was your biological father. You looked so much like your dad, and we were overjoyed at your arrival. I stayed home to care for you, feeling fulfilled and no longer alone. But when I returned to work, James resumed his offense, sometimes bringing a friend, Caleb, to join him. This torment continued until I became pregnant again. Near the end of that pregnancy, James violated me in your father's bed, forcing me to name the baby Caleb. Again, I complied out of fear. After Caleb's birth, James was transferred to the East Coast, and I felt liberated, yet his actions left lasting scars. I realized I had lost respect for your father, who never suspected what I endured. Though my resentment grew, I focused on being the mother I wanted to be for you boys. Over time, I sank into depression and loneliness again. A coworker, Susan, encouraged me to go out and have fun. Her group of friends introduced me to a partying lifestyle, which soon led to meaningless flings. Months later, I discovered I was pregnant again. When Eric was born, I believed he was your father's child. as you all shared similar features. But I refused to name him after your father's dad, asserting my independence. After Eric's birth, I returned to partying with Susan. Another pregnancy followed, and when Daniel was born, I knew the truth. I could see he wasn't your father's son. I prayed no one would notice. Fearing discovery, I agreed with your father to have my tubes tied after Daniel's birth. I stayed home with you boys and tried to be the best mother I could, but I had lost all respect for your father. He never uncovered my betrayals, and to me, that meant he didn't care. Over time, I convinced myself he wasn't worthy of my love, or yours. I need to clarify something. I always understood his work. I went through his briefcase nightly, listened to his conversations, and retained everything he mentioned. Though he didn't realize it, I knew more than he gave me credit for, about secret airplane designs and other classified projects. He was contributing to our country's future while I felt trapped in envy and guilt over my own actions as an unfaithful wife. When you were about 5, I tried to distract myself by volunteering with local nonprofits. Meetings often involved cocktails, and before long they became an excuse to avoid being alone. My fears resurfaced, and I often imagined Uncle Jack lurking around every corner. One night, walking to my car after a meeting, someone approached me. I panicked and swung my purse, hitting a young woman who was simply heading to her car. I broke her jaw. That moment shocked me to my core, making me realize I needed help. A woman at the nonprofit referred me to Dr. Lauren Harper, a psychologist. Lauren quickly identified my struggles as rooted in trauma from Uncle Jack and my more recent experiences. We began unpacking the events that had shaped my behavior. Through therapy, I confronted my past, including the damage I had done to our family. Lauren helped me shift focus to your father and our sons. Over time, I realized the blame I had placed on your father was unfair. He had always been present for games, lessons, and milestones, even while working tirelessly. Lauren's guidance forced me to see that I had been trying to drive a wedge between him and his children out of misplaced guilt and resentment. Slowly, she helped me rediscover my love for him. Lauren became more than a therapist. She became a mentor and a friend. She even visited our home to observe family dynamics, offering insights and support. She was there when I admitted my fear that Daniel might not be your father's son. She urged me to share the truth, but I couldn't. Your father was a man of principle who believed in accountability. I knew he wouldn't accept any explanation that shifted blame to the past. Eventually, he must have discovered the truth. He left a note that simply read, "I know, James." Those days after he left were some of the hardest of my life. You were so strong, and I've never been prouder of you. On the 3rd day, I called Lauren, and she pulled me out of bed, reminding me that my sons needed me. Her support helped me rejoin the living. We began anew, a single mother raising 4 sons. Together, we weathered every challenge. While much of the credit belongs to you and your brothers, your father's influence was still present. His wisdom and guidance, passed down to you, shaped your decisions and character. I tried to find him. Friends, family, and coworkers had no answers. It was as if he had vanished. Months after he left, the FBI contacted me. They questioned me intensely, and I explained that he had left because he discovered my infidelity. I assured them your father was a trustworthy, honorable man. Later, I learned they had located him in Atlanta. They wouldn't share details. Over the years, I've asked about him a few times, but the FBI remains tight-lipped. After 2 years, I decided to hire a private investigator. Though we couldn't afford much, he conducted a thorough search but turned up nothing. Life carried on. You did everything you could to support us while your brother stayed in school. I know the sacrifices you made, giving up college and working to help the family. For that, I'll always be grateful. About a month after you left for your road trip to San Diego, I uncovered a new truth. I understood why you needed that trip. Vanessa Brown wasn't the right person for you. I could see through her and hoped you wouldn't be too heartbroken when you realized it too. When you returned, you were a different person, more confident and aware, and even more helpful to your brothers and me. Before you left, I had been feeling unwell. Food lost its taste, I had persistent cramping, and my weight dropped. While you were gone, I finally went to see a doctor. After some tests, I was diagnosed with cancer. It had started in my ovaries and had already spread by the time we caught it. The outlook was grim. Though treatment could delay the inevitable, it wouldn't stop it. That's when I made another discovery. While searching your father's desk for insurance documents, I came across DNA test results. Like your father, I came face to face with the extent of my betrayal. The weight of it was unbearable. Suddenly, I understood why he had never come back. If the roles were reversed, I would have done the same. This revelation sealed my fate. I contemplated ending things early, but Lauren convinced me I needed to make plans for the future. I focused on ensuring you and your brothers would be stable after I was gone. I encouraged Eric and Caleb to attend San Diego State, then pushed Daniel to join them when he had his relapse, knowing you would end up there to support him. James, I did this for a reason. I didn't want you to witness my decline or for my death to become another dark chapter. I also didn't want to be remembered as a hero. I wanted you all to move on and live the lives your father had always hoped for you. When Eric and Caleb were accepted, I was thrilled. Daniel's challenges gave me the chance to send him to his brothers, knowing you'd step in to help him. I hated using you in that way, but I believed it was for the best. Now, as I lay here on my deathbed, I reflect on the good that came from my life. You, Caleb, Eric, and Daniel are my greatest blessings. Protect each other. Daniel still struggles, but maybe the truth will set him free. The end is near, and I have one last thing to tell you. A friend mentioned last year that she thought she saw your father in San Diego. James, you need to find him. The idea of you boys reconnecting with your father gives me peace. I know my time is short, but knowing he might be there to guide you after I'm gone makes it easier to let go. Please share my story with him. I know he may never forgive me, but he must forgive himself. He is Daniel's father in every way that matters, regardless of biology. He will care for Daniel, as he always has. If you need help, contact the FBI agent who once questioned me. He may have answers. As my pain grows and my days shorten, I know this is my burden to bear. I loved your father, but I destroyed him. Our family was built on lies, and when those lies came to light, it all crumbled. Only your father's strength and the love he gave you boys kept us afloat. Your father is not to blame for any of this. He is your father in every way that matters. Seek him out. He'll take responsibility, as he always has. Accept him for who he is and rebuild your family. James, the cancer is taking over. I've refused the morphine because I need to face this. I know you want to come home, but I can't allow it. This is how it must be. You must remain with your family. As I fade, I imagine you all with your father, and it gives me hope. If you find him, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I loved him. All my love, Mom. P.S. There's a second letter for your father. If you ever find him, please give it to him. James folded the tear-soaked letter and returned it to the envelope, holding the second letter meant for his father. Overwhelmed by grief and the weight of what he'd learned, he cried himself to sleep. The next morning, James shared both letters with his brothers and their father. James called Lauren, who came over quickly. She shared her memories of working with their troubled mother and her journey toward healing. Then she turned her attention to the family, helping them begin a new chapter. She saw their love and resilience and knew they'd thrive together. With Eric and Caleb enrolled at San Diego State, Daniel living with them, and their father supporting them, the family made arrangements to sell their mother's house. After a week in Colorado, the father and 3 sons returned to San Diego by company jet, while James stayed behind to finalize the sale. He donated most of the furniture and shipped their personal belongings west. Before leaving, James took one last look at the home where they'd grown up, cherishing the good memories. Locking the door for the final time, he started the drive to rejoin his family in California. 5 years later, the family had flourished. Eric and Caleb graduated and found successful careers. James returned to school, working toward a master's degree. Under his father's guidance, Daniel overcame his struggles, excelled academically, and attended UC San Diego. His passion for music also grew, and his band performed regularly in San Diego's Gaslamp district. Their father began therapy with Lauren's recommendation, working through the past with someone named Vivian. There was hope for all of them. I'm Andy Gilmore, and at 36, I've been hitched to Claire, my high school girlfriend, for 16 years now. April, our teenage daughter, is 14 years old. I'm a pretty solid guy, 6 feet tall and around 200 pounds. Most of that's muscle, though, comes with the territory when you've been an electrician for nearly 2 decades. Classroom learning wasn't really my thing, but I excel at practical tasks. Once I finished high school, I started training as an electrician. 4 years down the road, I passed the test to become a journeyman. By the time I hit 24, I'd already gotten my master's license. Intelligence isn't lacking in me, but I prefer hands-on work to studying from textbooks. I wanted to start my own business, but Claire preferred the stability of my job at Alpha Electrical Contractors, since we had a young daughter and she stayed home. My job provided a comfortable life. Our house and cars were paid off, We took vacations and never stressed over bills. I thought we were happy. Tom, my best friend since third grade, became a successful businessman after earning a degree from Stanford and an MBA. He makes more money, but is single, and frequently comes over for dinner and often talks about how envious he is of my family, reminding me that while money can buy many things, it can't buy love. I always agreed. I loved Claire, and April was my world. We were close, and I even taught her a bit about electrical work, though I hoped for more for her future. In August, my world collapsed. I returned home from a job and saw Tom's car in the driveway, which wasn't unusual since he often came over for dinner. Normally, when I arrived, my daughter April would greet me at the door, but this time she wasn't there. Curious, I asked Claire where she was, and she mentioned she was at her friend Danielle's house. Both Claire and Tom had odd expressions signaling something was off. When Claire said, "We need to talk," my heart sank. I had just come from a hot outdoor job and needed a shower, so I asked for a moment to clean up. In the shower, I thought about what might be going on. Could Claire be pregnant? We hadn't talked about more kids, but it had been a few weeks since we were intimate, and the timing seemed possible. That could explain her concern, though I would have embraced the idea of another child. But why was Tom involved? Maybe she confided in him first to gauge how I might react. I began to wonder if someone was seriously ill. I had no family left. My father had died in a car crash when I was 11, and my mother passed away 10 years later. Their divorce, caused by my mother's infidelity and my father's inability to cope with it, had shaped much of my childhood. Maybe the issue was with Claire's parents or her sister Liz. I even considered it could be Claire or Tom, but I figured I would have known sooner if that were the case. With nothing else to go on, I went downstairs to face whatever this was. When I joined them in the living room, I didn't pick up on the fact that Claire and Tom were sitting together on the couch while I sat alone on the love seat. Claire started by saying how much she appreciated me, but it quickly turned into a confession. She and Tom had fallen in love, and she wanted a divorce. It felt like a cinder block had hit my chest. I was speechless, struggling to comprehend what she was saying. Claire continued, hoping we could handle things smoothly for April's sake, keeping her life as undisturbed as possible. When I finally found my voice, I asked if she had slept with him. She gave me a wry smile, and her answer was a knife in my back. Of course I have, Andy. I was still reeling, trying to process everything. We had been together for over 20 years, more than half our lives. I had always believed we were happy, with nothing in our relationship that couldn't be worked out. Now, I was left grasping for answers, wondering where it had all gone wrong. Tom's attempt to interrupt was what finally got my voice back. "Andy, look! No!" I shouted, surprising even myself. "You're never to speak to me again, you backstabbing son of a witch. Let me make this clear, Tom. If you say another word to me, I will kill you, and I'd happily spend the rest of my life in prison for it. Nod if you get that." He nodded. Tom was just a suit, not very strong, and he knew I could break him in half if I wanted to. "There's no need to act like this," Claire jumped in. "Let's try to keep things civil, please, Andy." "It is necessary for me to act this way, and I'm being as civil as I can. I'm the one who's being betrayed and stomped on, so screw you and your ideas about how I should react." I spat at her. "And I'm taking custody of my little girl, not you." "Andy, I get that you're upset, but I'm not giving up custody of April," Claire said. "We can figure out a fair visitation schedule so you can spend plenty of time with her, but she's staying with us so her life can be as normal as possible. You work long hours, and I'll still be at home." "Forget that." I was really nailing it with my words. "You don't understand a damn thing. She's my kid too. I haven't spent the last 18 years busting my arse to support my family just to become a part-time dad because the hoe I married decided to trade up for someone with a bigger bank account. I guess that's why none of the other women ever worked out. He apparently had his eyes on you." "This isn't about money, Andy," she shot back. "The truth is we never should have gotten married. I thought I loved you, but we were just kids. I married you because we'd been together so long and everyone expected it. I tried to be a good wife, but as I grew older, I realized there was more for me out there. And I found it with Tom. We didn't mean for this to happen. He was just always around and we clicked. Honestly, we're surprised you never noticed how well we got along." That's when I saw they were holding hands. "I noticed," I said. "I just had faith in my wife and best friend, even if that faith was clearly misplaced. It never crossed my mind that two of the three people who meant the most to me would stab me in the back. You've already done enough to me. If you try to fight me on custody, the gloves come off. Got it?" "Then I guess the gloves are off," Claire replied. I'm sorry you think it has to be this way. It could have been handled a lot easier. Whatever. I'm sorry for making your complete betrayal harder than you want it to be, you witch. You two need to get the hell out of here. I'm not leaving the house I worked my arse off to pay for just because you think I'm not good enough anymore. I'm sure Mr. Moneybags can put you up in his bachelor pad. Fine, Claire said. I've already got a lot of stuff at his place anyway. That stung. I'll just grab a few more things and then we'll go. For what it's worth, Andy, I'm sorry. They were already out of earshot when I muttered, Nothing you say means anything, obviously. I sat silently on the couch while they packed in the bedroom for about 30 minutes. Tom left with a suitcase, and Claire followed, pausing briefly before leaving without saying a word. When April got home, I explained what happened, avoiding any harsh words about her mother or Uncle Tom. I believed in my bond with April, and was confident she would choose to stay with me. At 14, she had a significant say in custody decisions, and I trusted her love for me. I hired a lawyer, determined to fight hard, though he warned the laws weren't in my favor. Alimony seemed likely until Claire married Tom, and child support depended on where April chose to live. I felt sure I wouldn't have to pay. At the hearing 3 weeks later, Claire waived alimony, since Tom earned more and they planned to marry. I avoided looking at her during the proceedings. The judge spent an hour with April, who emerged in tears. I thought she felt guilty about choosing me. The judge granted the divorce, finalizing it in 120 days. Claire waived alimony and claims to our savings, which I kept. However, custody was awarded to Claire, allowing April to stay in the same school and environment. I was stunned. April had chosen Claire over me. I had misjudged everything, believing my family truly cared about me. It felt like a repeat of my past, being used and discarded. Now, they had a better option in Tom. The judge's words about equity, child support, and visitation blurred into background noise. I couldn't focus on anything but the betrayal I felt from the only 3 people that mattered to me. My attorney tried to reassure me, but it was just noise. I drifted into the hallway in a daze, vaguely aware of April hugging me and whispering, "Daddy." But I couldn't respond. The betrayal from Claire, Tom, and even April felt complete. I had no one left. Claire approached with a look of pity, promising I'd still see April, insisting this was for the best. Tom wisely stayed away. "I guess you won and I lost," I said. "I'll be out of here by the end of the week." Thinking I meant leaving the house, she replied, "There's no rush, Andy. Take your time. We can stay in the condo as long as we need to. I really hope we can get through this and learn to get along. You still mean a lot to me." I turned to face her, my voice now laced with anger. "Don't give me your crap. If I meant anything to you, this wouldn't have happened. Like I said, I'll be gone by the end of the week. Take your daughter and leave me alone." "She's our daughter, Andy," Claire said. "She'll see you next weekend." I growled. "No, she made her choice. She chose you. Goodbye, Claire." I walked out without looking back.
Claire. Tom listed his condo after the hearing, expecting a quick sale. Most of his things were packed, ready to move into the house Andy and I shared once Andy left. Our goal was to keep April's life stable since Tom's condo was in a different school district. Tom and I hadn't planned for this. We fell in love despite trying to resist. Hurting Andy wasn't the plan, but our feelings were too strong. Our first intimate moment happened when Andy had an overnight job, confirming we were meant to be together. In the following weeks, we met twice more before telling Andy. My feelings for Tom deepened. During those 2 weeks, it was hard to turn down Andy's advances, but I was now loyal to Tom. We knew Andy would be hurt, but we hoped he'd recover. We didn't expect how it all unfolded. Andy only communicated through his lawyer. He was supposed to pick up April at 4 p.m., but by 4:30 there was no sign of him. His phone was disconnected, and I couldn't reach his lawyer. Worried, I took April to the house. When we arrived, the house looked abandoned. Andy's things were gone, but April's room remained untouched. On the counter, I found a cashier's check covering Andy's child support until April's graduation. A knock on the door startled me, and I hoped it was Andy, but it was Mrs. Perrine, our neighbor. She informed me that Andy hadn't been around for days. He had emptied the house onto the lawn and a Salvation Army truck had picked everything up, likely the day after our divorce hearing. When I asked if he had left any forwarding information, she asked April to step outside. Then, with a sense of dread building, I braced myself for bad news. Mrs. Perrine shared the message Andy had left for me. He said, if you asked where he was, to tell you he'd see you in hell. Tears streamed down my face as the reality hit me. Andy was truly gone. He had prepaid his child support, given away everything he couldn't take with him, disconnected his phone, and left without a word. I had thought he meant he was just leaving the house, not disappearing from our lives entirely. When he referred to April as your daughter, I assumed it was said in anger, not a final severing of ties. After Mrs. Perrine left, April came back inside and saw my tears. I had no choice but to tell her the truth. Andy had left. She reacted with anger, blaming me for driving him away by being unfaithful and breaking up our family. She collapsed into tears, and I pulled her into my arms, apologizing, though I knew there was no easy way to make things right. We sat on the floor, crying together for what felt like hours but was only about 10 minutes. Eventually, we drove back to Tom's condo in silence. April shut herself in her room, crying again. Tom asked what had happened, and I explained everything. Andy had donated everything, cut off his phone, left the child support check, and told our neighbor that he would see us in hell. I confessed my fear that Andy might do something drastic. Leaning into Tom, I struggled to comprehend the enormity of what had just happened. Tom said, "I never would have believed he'd react like this. He's always been the one that could handle the crisis. When we were being stupid and shattering beer bottles outside that school one night and the cops showed up, we all scattered, but there was no way we'd all get away. He calmly put himself in harm's way to let the rest of us escape. We asked him why the next day, and he said there was no other way out of it. They needed to catch someone. Once they did, he figured they'd stop looking for anyone else. And he said he was the most logical choice since he was the one with the record. He gave himself up for us. It was perfectly logical to him. I knew he'd be hurt by this, but was sure he'd understand that it made sense and we'd somehow move on. There's nothing we can do now until he turns up."
Andy. Being an electrician meant I could find work anywhere, even while staying off the radar. I had canceled all my credit cards, paid cash for everything, and moved 3 states away before they realized the house was empty. I found a local contractor who paid me in cash, offering a lower rate than I deserved, but I didn't mind since I didn't need much money and just wanted to keep busy. The contractor asked if I was on the run. I explained I wasn't, just avoiding being found. He seemed to understand, mentioning his own ex-wife, which made me smile. I slept in my car using a nearby truck stop to shower and shave. Although I could afford a room, I avoided anything that required my name. They probably weren't searching for me, especially since they had the child support, but I wasn't taking chances. With colder weather approaching, I found a room for rent. The owner, an elderly woman named Miss Ruth, was willing to do things informally. She didn't need the money, but wanted company and help fixing up her mobile home. In exchange for staying off the record and working on repairs, I'd stay there a few nights a week. It seemed like a fair deal, so I agreed.
Claire. The divorce was finalized in mid-January, and April's 15th birthday followed about a week later. She held on to the hope that her father would reach out, but the day passed without any contact. That night, I was devastated to hear her crying into her pillow. I went into the bedroom I now shared with Tom, a space that used to belong to Andy and me. Tom was reading, as usual. I couldn't believe that Andy had completely cut off contact with April, seemingly giving up on her just because she chose to live with us. Tom admitted he was surprised too, and suggested that we had underestimated how much the situation had hurt him. However, he reminded me that we couldn't let this overshadow our lives together. We needed to move forward, and possibly help April process her feelings through counseling. I agreed, realizing that with Andy gone, we would need to support her in coming to terms with his absence.
Andy. I had been living with Miss Ruth for nearly 3 years, sticking to a routine of going to work and coming home. Most nights I stayed in with her, having no interest in going out or meeting women. It was January, and I had quietly marked my 40th birthday 2 months earlier. Despite trying to forget my past, thoughts of it would creep in. My ex-wife was about to turn 40 as well, and her 3-year anniversary with Tom, whom she married 2 months after our divorce, was coming up. I had seen their wedding announcement online and gotten drunk that day. I also knew my former daughter was turning 18 this month and would graduate high school in June. Brief thoughts about her college plans surfaced, but I quickly pushed them away. All I wanted was a drink to block out memories of those who had betrayed me.
Claire. April had been driving since she was 16, so when she turned 18 and saw the new car we had given her in the driveway, We felt good about letting her take some friends to the mall for the day. We had come to terms with the fact that we no longer expected anything from her father on her birthday, but we still held on to a glimmer of hope. Yet once again the day went by without anything showing up. April. Graduation day. As I sat among the 347 students in my high school class, I shed a few quiet tears for what my life could have been. My parents should still be married, sitting together to watch me walk across the stage, something we had talked about for years. It felt selfish, but I couldn't help how I felt. Mom seemed happy now, having moved on with Tom, and they clearly loved each other, probably more than she ever loved Dad. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that none of this should have happened. I scanned the crowd and spotted Mom and Tom, who waved when our eyes met. Not far from them, I saw Danielle's parents, who had supported me through the divorce and afterward. They had always tried to help me understand the pain Dad likely felt, even though they didn't approve of his choices. I appreciated their presence, even if they were really there for Danielle. As I looked around at other familiar faces, one suddenly stood out. Near the back, a man with long hair and glasses caught my eye. I stood up to get a better look, but just like that, he was gone. Maybe it had only been my imagination. Claire. The next 4 years passed quickly, and without any major events. Despite our attempts, including visits to fertility specialists, Tom and I couldn't conceive a child. I would have loved to give Tom a child, but it wasn't meant to be. Still, we were happy together, even though we regretted some of the fallout from our choices. April was preparing to graduate from UC Berkeley, aiming for a teaching career. She had started dating a young man named Benjamin, and they seemed to be a great match. As often happened during significant moments in April's life, my thoughts drifted to Andy. It had been 7 years since we'd heard anything from him. We had once contacted his attorney, but were told there were no messages from Andy, and even if the lawyer knew where he was, he couldn't tell us. I found some comfort in knowing we hadn't been informed of his death, assuming he was still alive somewhere. I often wondered what his life had become, and if he had managed to move past the hurt I caused him.
Andy. Still living off the grid, I rented a room at a boarding house, paying cash without a lease, thanks to Miss Ruth's reference. At 44, I stayed in good shape. Miss Ruth had fallen ill, her family moved her to a care facility, and her mobile home was sold. I kept working for the same company, still paid in cash, with occasional raises. I wasn't exactly happy, but I had found peace. That changed when I walked into Denny's for lunch. I hadn't been there in a few weeks. Gail, a woman in her early 60s, had become someone I confided in. When I arrived, she directed me to a booth instead of the counter. It became clear why when my server appeared. Someone new, mid-30s, tall, slim, blonde, and beautiful. Her name tag read Sheila. We exchanged glances throughout my meal, and there was a clear connection between us. When her shift ended, Sheila wished me a good day, something she hadn't done with other customers. Taking it as a sign, I asked her to dinner. She smiled and agreed. After she left, I asked Gail for details. Sheila, 35, had an 8-year-old daughter named Megan. Her husband had left her for her best friend, and she'd moved here for a fresh start. Gail had set things in motion, thinking we'd be a great match. I arrived at Denny's early with flowers, nervous but excited. Sheila appeared promptly at 6 o'clock, looking stunning in a white floral dress and pink heels. We complimented each other, and the connection was undeniable. Walking to Maggie's Steakhouse arm in arm felt natural. Seated at a cozy booth, Sheila shared that she had just started at Denny's and appreciated the schedule, which allowed her to be there for her 8-year-old daughter, Megan. When she asked if I had kids, I said no, distancing myself from April. Sheila explained that any man in her life would need to be ready to eventually take on a father role for Megan. I reassured her I liked kids, though thoughts of April briefly surfaced. I admitted to being divorced, keeping the details minimal. After dinner, Sheila asked to be dropped back at the restaurant. She wasn't ready for Megan to see her with someone new until she was certain about our relationship. I respected her decision and reassured her we could take things at her pace. Sheila couldn't go out the next night, but she invited me for breakfast, which I gladly accepted. 2 nights later, I took her to a country western bar where we danced. She turned down offers from others, focusing solely on me, which was a refreshing change from my past with Claire. Our connection deepened, leading to a passionate kiss, and we headed back to my place. Back at the boarding house, we became intimate, sharing a meaningful night together. Afterward, I insisted on driving her home for safety. We shared a lingering kiss before parting. For dinner, I brought a green teddy bear for Megan, who eagerly accepted it. She showed me her stuffed animal collection, and Sheila and I shared a quick kiss. Megan's lively energy filled the evening, reminding me of April at her age, stirring up some old emotions that I quickly suppressed. After dinner, Sheila and I sat on the couch, holding hands and talking, while watching Megan play with her stuffed animals, including her new friend Bobby, the green teddy bear. It was a simple yet heartwarming evening. Rather abruptly, Megan stopped and looked at me. "Are you going to be my new daddy?" I gently explained to Megan that while her mom and I were still getting to know each other, marriage was far off. I reassured her that we'd spend lots of time together as a family, but there would also be moments when it was just me and Sheila. Megan seemed satisfied and focused on her ice cream. As we ate, old painful memories resurfaced, and I fought back tears, which Sheila noticed but didn't address. Later, I read Megan a bedtime story, feeling honored by the request. On the couch, Sheila praised how I handled Megan's questions. She invited me to stay the night with the understanding that I'd leave before Megan woke up. I agreed, and we spent a deeply intimate night together. Despite my lingering fears, being with Sheila felt like a second chance at love. Afterward, she checked on Megan, who was fast asleep with her new teddy bear. I dressed quietly and left, grateful for how things were unfolding and hopeful for the future.
Sheila. I was relaxing in Andy's bed while Megan was at a sleepover, and I had the day off. Andy had gone to work after we spent the night together, making love most of the night and again in the morning. We've been together for 8 months now, and I'm completely in love. I'm pretty sure he feels the same, and I expect him to propose any day now. After rolling out of bed and showering, I started to look around Andy's room. We usually stayed at my place because of Megan, so I wasn't here often, and this was one of the few times I'd been here alone. His room was simple: small desk, filing cabinet, microwave, hot plate, and a queen-size bed. As I glanced around, I noticed a file box tucked into the corner of his closet. It piqued my curiosity, especially since it was from the period of his life before he moved to Texas, which he never talked about. Torn between respecting his privacy and wanting to know more about the man I planned to marry, I decided to take a quick look. Inside, I found his marriage certificate and divorce decree, which didn't surprise me, but then I saw he had a daughter named April, now around 22, which would have made her just 14 when they divorced. I was stunned, as Andy had told me he didn't have any kids. The rest of the paperwork seemed normal, but this revelation about his daughter left me with more questions. There was even a phone number for his ex-wife, Claire. I carefully put everything back, unsure what to do next. Maybe Gail, who had known Andy for years, could give me some answers. I decided I'd start by talking to her. The next morning, I got to work early to talk to Gail. I asked her what she knew about Andy's past before he moved here, hoping for some insight. Gail reacted with concern, warning me to leave it alone and trust that Andy was a good man who would take care of me. Despite her advice, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed answers, especially after discovering that Andy had a daughter he had never mentioned. Throughout the day, I kept thinking about it. When Andy came in for breakfast, I did my best to act normal, but my mind was racing. After my shift ended, I returned to my apartment to think things through. The more I considered it, the more I realized that I needed to understand why Andy had left his daughter behind, especially since I had a daughter of my own, Megan. She adored Andy, and he treated her like his own. But if he could abandon one child, could he do it again? I couldn't risk Megan's heart without knowing the full story. As her mother, her well-being came first, even before my own happiness. Since neither Gail nor Andy would give me any answers, I knew I had only one option left to find out the truth. Claire. The phone showed a private number, and though I had grown accustomed to receiving junk calls, I still answered in the slim hope it might be Andy. When the voice on the other end asked for Claire Gilmore, my old married name, I nearly hung up, assuming it was another sales call. But the uncertainty in the voice made me pause. The caller introduced herself as Sheila and told me she was dating my ex-husband, Andy. Shocked, I stood frozen, unable to process the unexpected news. For years, I had thought about what I would say if someone ever contacted me about him, but now that it was happening, I couldn't find the right words. After a brief moment to collect myself, I continued the conversation. Sheila confirmed that she was dating Andy and understood my surprise, acknowledging that I hadn't heard from him in 8 years. She said Andy was doing well but wouldn't tell me where he was, sensing he wouldn't want her to share that information. She confessed to doing some snooping, as Andy had never opened up to her about his past. It stung a bit to hear that he had made a new life, even finding a girlfriend, yet he still wouldn't acknowledge our past together. Of course, I understand. I'm glad to hear he's doing well. He's a good man, Sheila. He didn't deserve what I did to him. If you don't mind me asking, Claire, what exactly did you do to him? I'm not really surprised he didn't tell you. To put it briefly, we were together for over 20 years and married for 16, and I divorced him to marry his best friend, who he had known since 3rd grade. Wow, it sounds terrible when I say it like that. Wow. My husband did the same thing to me. He divorced me for my best friend. Small world, isn't it? We hadn't been together as long, though, but that doesn't explain why he left the way he did. People get divorced all the time, even for reasons like yours. But they don't just up and leave their kids. There's got to be more to it. There is. I went on to explain what led to Andy's departure. I don't think he viewed it as abandoning his daughter because in his eyes, she had already left him first by choosing to live with me and Tom. Actually, right after the divorce hearing, he referred to her as your daughter and mentioned he'd be gone in a week, but I didn't grasp what he meant at the time. I can't say I agree with his actions, but I can understand them a bit better now, said Sheila. I didn't want to stir things up, but I felt this might be my only chance to discuss it. Sheila, I know you don't owe me anything, and this isn't for me, I said. April is getting married soon. She's tried to move on and cope with the fact that her father hasn't reached out since she was 14, not even a birthday card. Now, with her wedding approaching, she's constantly upset that her dad won't be there to walk her down the aisle, a moment she's imagined since she was a little girl. If you have any influence over him, if you can do anything... Sheila remained calm, didn't freak out, or hang up. She thoughtfully considered my request and responded sensibly, despite being the one currently in his life and the one who had something to lose. I understand what you're asking, Claire. If I bring this up, he might leave me and just disappear again. He can get a job anywhere and he's not short on money. I wouldn't even know how to start this conversation, much less convince him to come. Of course, I get it. Maybe it's better to let things be. Sheila, thank you so much for this call. Please keep my number. I would really appreciate it if you could update me occasionally on how he's doing. It would be comforting to know that he's moved on with his life. I'll keep your number, Sheila replied. But I can't promise more than that. I hope you understand. I immediately phoned Tom at work to share what had happened. Did you manage to get her contact details or anything we can use? No, her number was blocked and she didn't share her last name. But maybe this is just a small step towards something bigger. Sheila. I ended the call feeling both relieved and uncertain. I had learned what I needed, but now I had to decide what to do with it. Claire was right. I didn't owe them anything. Why should I risk my relationship with Andy for them? But it wasn't about them. It was about me and Megan. If I were in Claire and April's place, I'd want someone to help, at least for my daughter's sake. I couldn't shake the fear that Andy might abandon Megan, just like he had left April. I needed to know if his past actions were circumstantial or part of his nature. I made a tough decision, knowing it could risk everything. Andy needed to confront his past and face April. If I were to trust him with Megan's heart, he had to address what he had done, not keep it buried. The next day, I called Claire again. She was surprised but agreed to help. I asked for April's number and her promise to keep Andy's location a secret. She understood and gave me the number after preparing April for my call. After waiting, I nervously dialed April's number, ready to speak to Andy's daughter for the first time, knowing it wouldn't be an easy conversation. Good afternoon. This is April Gilmore. Is this Sheila? Yes, it is, I replied. Your mother must have explained what's going on. She did, and she made it clear that anything you tell me about my father should be kept from her. I'm sorry it has to be like this, but I understand. I'm ready to do whatever you need. You'll need to fly into Austin International Airport as soon as you can. I'll pick you up and take you to your dad. You can stay with me while you're here, and we'll just see what unfolds. Can I ask you something? April inquired. Why are you risking your relationship for me? You don't even know me. That's a valid question, April, Sheila said. I was in your shoes once, and my daughter is in your position now, just a girl wanting her father in her life. Some things are too important to ignore. I need to know the man I plan to marry, and I want him to make things right with you. While we spoke, April went online and booked a flight to Austin for the next day. She emailed me the itinerary, and I'd pick her up myself. Now, all that was left to do was wait.
Andy. When I got home from work, exhausted, I was pleasantly surprised to find Sheila waiting for me, completely without clothes. I pulled her into my arms and kissed her deeply, forgetting everything else in that moment. We spent an incredible night together, including a new level of intimacy when she gave me her a-hole for the first time. I briefly wondered what prompted the occasion, but decided not to question it. My love for Sheila was overwhelming, stronger than anything I'd felt before, even with Claire. It made me understand in some way why Claire made her decision, though it didn't lessen the pain or betrayal. As I dropped Sheila back at her apartment, I had the engagement ring in my pocket, almost ready to propose, but I wanted the moment to be perfect, so I held off. When she closed the door, her expression seemed slightly bittersweet, and I hoped everything was all right.
Sheila. After dropping Megan off at school, I drove to the airport to meet April. At baggage claim, I held a sign with her name and scanned the crowd. Despite the many people, I recognized her immediately when she smiled and walked toward me. We exchanged pleasantries, and she mentioned how eager she was to see her father after 8 years. We drove back to Marble Falls, the small town where Andy and I lived. Before reaching town, I pulled over and called Rosie, Andy's dispatcher, to find out where he was working. She told me he was at the Beals on 4th and Main and joked about a past encounter in the back of Andy's truck, which made me blush. April caught on, teasing me lightly. As we neared the department store, I spotted Andy's truck. I instructed April to wait a few feet back while I positioned myself near the driver's door. After about 20 minutes, we heard Andy's voice, signaling that the moment they had both waited for was about to happen.
Andy. After fixing the electrical issue in the restroom, I headed out to finish the last 2 calls before returning to Sheila and Megan. I had been carrying the ring with me, waiting for the right moment to propose, though I knew I might have to create that opportunity soon. As I walked toward my truck, I saw Sheila's car parked behind it and spotted her standing near the door. I reached for the ring box in my pocket, thinking this might be the moment, but then I noticed someone else, April. Seeing her instantly brought back a flood of emotions, the pain of betrayal, fear of what her sudden appearance might mean, and anger toward Sheila for orchestrating this meeting. I greeted April with a flat tone, acknowledging her presence, then turned to Sheila, realizing she must have found out about my past, and facilitated this. Trying to avoid the emotions rising inside me, I quickly mentioned that I still had work to do, put my tools in the truck, and prepared to move on with my day. "Daddy, I'm getting married." "Is that right?" I answered. "Congratulations." I paused, unable to squelch the anger that was burning inside me. Try not to become a cheating hoe like your mother. With that, I climbed into the truck and shut the door. It didn't end there, as April was now at my window, banging on it with both fists. "I saw you! I know you still love me and care about me because I saw you!" She was yelling to be heard through the glass, which I then rolled down. "What are you talking about, April? My high school graduation. You were in the back and you were trying not to be noticed. But it was you. That's how I know you still love me. I don't know what it is you think you saw, April, but it sure as hell wasn't me." I fired up the truck and pulled away. Damn it. I knew I should have gotten rid of that stuff, but I was trying to be cautious and hold on to a few things just in case. Now, my old life has come back to haunt me and tear me apart. Clearly, once wasn't enough. I drove for about 10 minutes before pulling over to gather my thoughts. How could Sheila do this to me? I was happy, damn it. After all these years, I finally found love and was content. I should have realized it wouldn't last. Happiness clearly wasn't meant for me, and I won't make that mistake again. I've yet to have anyone enter my life without eventually betraying me. Why would this time be any different? Finally, I pulled back onto the road, heading to my next job. I'd finish my calls today, then call my boss to let him know my past had finally caught up with me, and I'd be moving on. He'd understand.
Sheila. April was crying on my shoulder. I was completely stunned by how cold Andy had been. This was his own child, for God's sake. What she did wasn't that terrible. Kids make choices like this all the time, so this was clearly more about him and the pain he was feeling. Andy had always been nothing but loving to Megan and me. This behavior seemed so out of character for him. I helped April into the car and drove to my apartment. "You'll stay with me for now. This was just the first attempt. I'll talk to him again when he gets off work." I was trying to reassure her, even though I wasn't entirely sure myself.
Andy. When I returned to the boarding house after 6:30 p.m., I expected to find Sheila and April waiting for me, but they weren't there. It was a relief in a way, making my decision to leave easier. I loved Sheila and Megan deeply, but after what she had done, bringing April back into my life, I felt betrayed. Now that my past had resurfaced, I couldn't trust Sheila anymore. I began packing, knowing I would leave behind everything I had at Sheila's. Ignoring the knock on the door, I continued. But when the door opened, I knew it had to be Sheila. She leaned against the wall, watching silently before confronting me about leaving again. She admitted to speaking with Claire, finding out everything from the past. She said the same thing happened to her, but he left it alone and lived his life. I lashed out, pointing out how our situations weren't the same. Her betrayal wasn't like mine, not after 20 years of marriage, and a daughter choosing to side with those who destroyed me. Frustrated, I let years of buried pain surface, recalling how my mother cheated on my father and then abandoned me. My father took his life, and I was left to endure abuse from my stepfather. The scars on my back were a constant reminder of a childhood filled with neglect and violence. As I walked around the room, I kept thinking, why did Sheila have to dig this up? I was finally happy again. I had her and Megan, and I had worked so hard to leave the past behind. Those people were nothing to me anymore, just shadows of a life I didn't want. I'd been looking forward to the future, and now Sheila had opened up this can of worms again. Why couldn't she just let things be? She had nothing to do with them, and neither did Megan. Weren't we happy? Sheila tried to explain that she had found out about April and felt she needed to understand why I left her behind. I could see it now. She was afraid that if I could walk away from my own daughter, then I could walk out on Megan too. It was obvious in the way she looked at me, and it hit me hard. I felt betrayed again, this time by the one person I thought I could count on now. The realization pissed me off even more. I told Sheila that if she didn't trust me, I would save her the trouble of worrying about it. I'd be gone by morning. I was done with ruining lives. I told her to join the club of people who'd hurt me, and that once I was gone, she could cozy up to my daughter and the rest of the backstabbers. Maybe they'd come up with some new ways to get to me. But I wouldn't be around for them to mess with anymore. I thought I'd made my point, but all I really did was piss her off. And as I stood there, staring at her, I realized I might have just pushed away the one good thing I had left.
Sheila. I had reached my limit with Andy's self-pity and bitterness. I loved him deeply, but I couldn't stand by while he destroyed everything we had. He acted like the world was out to get him, but the reality was different. His daughter had dropped everything to come see him because she loved him and wanted him in her life. She wanted him to walk her down the aisle and meet his future grandchildren. Even his ex-wife, who he believed hated him, was simply trying to help their daughter find closure. If Andy wanted to stay trapped in his anger and bitterness, that was his choice. But I wasn't going to stay with someone who couldn't move forward. I admitted that yes, I worried he might walk out on me and Megan, especially after finding out he had done it before, but I was ready to understand, and I could have, if only he had trusted me enough to talk about it. Relationships are built on trust, and I had shared everything about myself with him, even the things I wasn't proud of. I did it because I believed in us, and I wanted him to take care of me, not out of need, but out of love. I threw his key at him in frustration, hitting him square in the chest. He didn't even flinch, which only fueled my anger. I told him he could leave, go back to just existing like he had for 7 years, instead of living like he had with me and Megan for the past 8 months. If that's what he wanted, fine. But I wanted something more, and I had hoped to find it with him. Without looking back, I stormed out, slamming the door behind me, making the whole building shake. As much as I wanted him to chase after me, to beg me to stay, I meant every word. I couldn't live with someone who refused to let go of the past and embrace the love we had right in front of us.
Andy. As Sheila slammed the door behind her, it hit me that I had been wrong. In trying to protect myself from the pain of betrayal, I had pushed away those I loved. I didn't want to lose Sheila and Megan, and there was also the chance of reconnecting with April, but I knew I had a lot to fix. I stopped packing and rushed to Sheila's place. Seeing her car there, I knew I had to make things right. Kneeling at her door, ready to apologize, she opened it before I could knock. I admitted my mistakes, told her I needed her, and begged for forgiveness, promising to do whatever it took. Sheila forgave me, but on one condition: I had to make things right with April. I agreed, relieved for a second chance. Inside, April sat on the couch, clearly having cried. I knelt in front of her, holding her hands, emotions flooding me. I apologized for letting my anger and hurt cloud my judgment. I explained how I believed her choice to live with her mother was a betrayal, leading me to leave. Thanks to Sheila, I finally saw how wrong I was and asked for her forgiveness. April forgave me, saying she was never angry, just sad. She wished I had talked to her before leaving, but she understood the pain her mother's actions had caused. We hugged, trying to make up for the lost years. Noticing Sheila crying, April invited her into the hug, and we shared an emotional moment together. After asking where Megan was, Sheila brought her in, and I reminded her of my promise about becoming her new dad. She remembered, and I told her to watch closely. Back in the living room, I lifted Sheila to her feet, thanked her for reuniting me with April, and proposed. She said yes, and we shared a kiss, with April and Megan watching. April corrected me when I called them stepsisters, insisting they'd just be sisters. We celebrated with dinner and planned a courthouse wedding. That same night, I started moving into Sheila's apartment. At the wedding, I felt sharp in my tux, but Sheila looked stunning in her pink dress, her pregnancy just starting to show. April looked like a princess, and Benjamin was thrilled to see her walking down the aisle with me. I had managed to avoid Claire and Tom, only glimpsing them briefly during preparations and the rehearsal. Claire had gained a lot of weight, now well over 200 pounds. She once said life with Tom made her fat and happy. Whether she was truly happy, I didn't know. But the weight gain was obvious, and part of me wondered if guilt had played a role. As Sheila and I stood chatting with some of Benjamin's relatives, I didn't notice Claire and Tom approaching from behind. Claire's voice, which once felt heavenly, now grated on my ears. Any fond feelings I had for her had long since faded, though, for April's sake, I tried to remain civil. I saw Tom begin to say something, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Tom, do you remember the last thing I said to you? Nod if you remember." He nodded. My feelings have not changed. Sheila, sensing the tension, joined him as they walked away, leaving me and Claire alone for the first time in years. Once Sheila and Tom had left, Claire and I stood in silence. I could have gone the rest of my life without speaking to her again, but that clearly wasn't an option. She broke the silence, expressing surprise that after all this time, the animosity still lingered. She hoped we could move past it, maybe even be friends, given that we had all seemingly found happiness in our new lives. She acknowledged Sheila and our happiness together, including my role as a father to Megan, something she had learned about recently. I made it clear that her hopes for reconciliation were misplaced. The intense love I once had for her had turned into a deep hatred for both her and Tom. When she asked why I couldn't let it go, I explained, starting with the painful truth of my past. My mother had repeatedly cheated on my father before leaving him for another man. My father, devastated, took his own life, something I had hidden out of embarrassment. This background, however, wasn't the core issue. The real pain came from the betrayal of the three people I loved most: Claire, April, and Tom. I had built my life around them, believing we would grow old together, but their actions shattered those dreams. Claire admitted that she had loved me, but not in the way I had loved her, something she couldn't control. But for me, the betrayal wasn't just about the loss of a romantic connection. It was about the destruction of trust and the sense of betrayal that two of the people I relied on the most had conspired together to rip apart everything I thought I knew. "Andy, we didn't mean for it to happen," she said. "You didn't stop it either. You just went after what you wanted, ignoring the consequences." Do you even understand how hard it was for me to think about trusting another woman after what you did? Losing you and Tom wasn't enough. You took April, too. April made that choice on her own? Bullshit. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't influence her to stay with you. I know what you said. It'll be strange with Tom here instead of Daddy, but at least I'll still be here after school and you can see your dad whenever possible. Tell me that didn't happen. Claire couldn't deny it, and I knew she wouldn't. You wanted it all, didn't you? Your selfishness destroyed someone who loved and supported you for 16 years? Did you ever think how that would affect me? Did you ever suggest to April that maybe she should live with me so I wouldn't be left completely alone? You're right, Andy. I didn't think of it like that, but you disappeared without saying a word. What did you expect me to do? My whole family was gone. I was left alone while my wife and daughter lived with the man who replaced me. Did you think I could stay there and watch my life move on without me, only to see my daughter a few days a month? I had two choices: cut all ties or end my life. And honestly, I was close to choosing the latter. When I told Mrs. Perrine I'd see you in hell, I meant it. I even had the gun. Claire, shocked, said, "God, Andy, I had no idea." Of course you didn't. You were too busy with your new life to care. You replaced me, convinced April to stay with you, and never once checked on me. After the hearing, I told you I'd be gone in a week. I didn't mean just out of the house, I meant dead. You didn't even ask what I meant. I didn't end myself because I hated you and Tom too much to give you the satisfaction. Andy, I cut her off, saying, I let my anger cloud my judgment with April. When she chose to live with you, I assumed she had picked your side and wanted Tom as her father, and I overreacted by leaving without a word. That cost me 8 years I can never get back. Thankfully, Sheila pulled me out of that spiral, or who knows how much more I would have lost. Now I know what it's like to have someone who actually cares about me. Do you understand why I still hate you? I get it, Andy, she admitted. I hoped time would heal things, but it hasn't. I'm sorry for how we handled it. Can we at least be civil? Yes, we share a daughter. I'll treat you like any stranger. But make sure Tom never speaks to me again, or you'll be a widow. Over the next 2 years, I gradually bought out my boss as he retired, becoming the largest electrical contractor in Marble Falls and one of the biggest in Central Texas. While I still went on calls occasionally, I mostly ran the business from the office with my wife Sheila and 10-year-old daughter Megan on staff. Sheila managed appointments, I handled staff and projects, and we did the paperwork together. Megan adored her new baby sister, Katie. A year after our wedding, Benjamin got a promotion to Dallas, about 4 hours away, but we still see them monthly. They're expecting my first grandchild next year. Nothing terrible happened to Tom and Claire, aside from their significant weight gain. While I don't care to hear about them, April keeps Sheila updated, and Sheila occasionally shares. Sheila doesn't hold a grudge like I do. She even sends them a thank you card on our anniversary, saying their actions brought us together.